I want to show you what this guy has to say for himself. It gets crazy. Apparently, he's from a church called James River Church in Missouri. Listen to what he had to say here.
People come to me and they'll have some sort of a problem, a disease, and they'll say, all right, do you know of anyone who's ever been healed of this before? That's our starting place, because if we have a testimony, then a legal precedent has been set.
If you have a testimony, a legal precedent has been set. All right.
It was a carpenter, and he just had problems with his back because he had broken his leg as a kid. And he came and he said, my leg that was broken, when it healed, it grew past the other one. And he said,
when the leg was broken, it grew past the other one.
Have you ever seen that healed before? What is he asking? He said, is there a legal precedent? And so I thought for a moment, I went, yes, I have. I had a pastor friend that was in a skiing accident. And when they put him back together, they had too many parts, and he had a leg that was too long. And so we were talking in an Italian restaurant. And I said, hey, turn the chair aside. So he turned the chair aside, and I held out.
This dude reminds me so much of Kent Christmas. It's ridiculous. Kent Christmas is another televangelist.
His legs in the restaurant, and commanded the long leg to shrink, and it shrank. And he went back to the therapist. Everything was fine. So I'm sitting there with this guy's telling me a story. He says, you ever have seen this before? I said, yeah. I said, I have seen it. I said, sit down. Let's sit down. So I'm holding his leg up, and I thought he wanted it to shrink, and I thought, most people like to be taller.
What he's talking about here is this leg lengthening scam that televangelists have been doing for like decades and decades. Now, the reason that they do this leg lengthening scam where, it makes it look like your leg is getting longer than it is because it's a really easy scam to run. Basically, all you have to do is grab their shoe and slowly pull on it. Oh, by the way, while we watch this stuff, we're going to play some Breath of the Wild while we listen. If you've never played it before or not familiar, it'll just be in the background. Shouldn't bother you too much. Anyways, these people have been running this scam for years because it's really easy to do. Like, it's basically sleight of hand. It's like a magic trick. You make people believe that you are making somebody's leg longer than it originally was, and you're doing it by the power of God. Now, most people who run this scam or ran this scam kind of gave up on it because it's so notorious and well known in the evangelical world as the scam that it is. But I guess there are still people out there like this guy that feel compelled to justify and explain the scam and pretend that it's still in use today. So he's talking about this leg lengthening trick with this guy. He wants to make people taller, okay?
The leg that was normal, had no issues, and I commanded it to grow, and it actually grew out even with the other one. And he stood up.
See, there's the leg lengthening thing. He commanded it to grow out, and it grew out like the other. Just absurd, dude.
He was completely healed, and of course we rejoiced and celebrated. And I went home going, oh, thank you.
So anyways, this is a faith healer guy, apparently. I had never heard of this before, but he runs these scams on people, as it turns out. So I wanted to watch that episode, that whole thing, see what he had to say for himself, because it gets absurd. I listened to a few minutes of it. That's not even the craziest part, okay? Let's listen to this. James River Church came out like mid-March 2023, basically. Check this out.
A number of years ago, I was reading. I pastored in a mountain community called Weaverville, and my family and I were there for 17 years. And I remember I was sitting in the office one day and I was reading, and I read that verse out of Revelation chapter 19, verse 10. I was reading through Revelation, but that one verse just seemed to grab me. And that passage is, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy.
Okay, I feel like what he just said, that sentence, was nonsensical, right? What grabbed me is the Spirit of Jesus was what? It's like he said a bunch of words that are relevant to religious people in religious circles, but actually meant absolutely nothing when put together. By the by, if you have played Breath of the Wild, I'm about to do a little trick to farm dragon scales here. It's really quick and easy, just like me. And you'll see how to get like a whole bunch of these scales really, really rapidly. Just watch what I do here. You'll see.
You know when you feel life on a word, but you're clueless as to what he's saying?
You feel life on a word. So he's saying, you know how when you're reading the Bible and it makes absolutely no sense to you, but you feel like it should make sense? Okay, sure, I'm with you.
That's where your heart is learning before your head does.
Or it's when the Bible passage that you're reading is just nonsense. Maybe it's just nonsense. Maybe it means absolutely nothing, never did. You ever consider that one?
Revere those moments because he just deposited something in you
that's what she said.
Can change you from the inside out. And so this moment I had in reading, it just highlighted, and I felt so strong about it. I stopped my reading. I said, God, teach me what that's about. Teach me what that means, because I could feel life on it. Do you remember when Jesus preached his most famous sermon where the crowd left in disgust, where he said, you have to drink my blood, you have to eat my flesh?
Okay, if you walk through the fire pit here and drop the torch when you're in the middle of it, it'll drop it on the corner. The torch stays lit, so this is like a permanent fire that I don't have to keep lighting every night. And it's far enough away right here that I can farm as many scales as I want, and the dragon just keeps coming back up. So I'm going to sleep here till morning. I'm going to fly up. The fire will be lit again when I fly up. I'm going to fly up, shoot the dragon horn, because that yields the highest amount or whatever, like, 300 rupees, I think it is. So I'm just going to shoot his horn, drop back down, wait for it to fly off. Okay, it's off of his horn now. It doesn't have to land. It just has to be off his horn. Now I can sleep till morning again. And I just keep doing this over and over and over again. It takes me about 17 seconds every round that I do. And I can do this 33 times before I have to go collect all of them. They just stop coming off of his horn after 33 of them. But I'm not going to do 33. I need like 15 or so. So it's pretty quick. Anyway, let's keep listening here. That
podcast didn't go far. Nobody bought the CD and sent that to friends. That one didn't go over well. If you can imagine a crowd of 20,000 people
He's talking about Jesus saying something that was not very popular, okay? Of course, the joke is that they didn't have podcasts in Jesus' day.
As people are grumbling over the sermon, they slowly leave until Jesus is left with 12 guys. That's church growth at its finest right there. That's that course is never taught in church growth seminars. But in this amazing moment, Jesus is teaching about the crucifixion, about his broken body, his blood, and he's teaching them through this course. And every time they got offended, he just turned it up a notch. He just didn't seem to be that concerned about people's offense.
Okay, what is he talking about? I don't remember this from Jesus. Does anybody have any idea what he's referencing right now? What talk is he referring to? He's saying Jesus was offending people with the things that he said, but he kept getting more and more offensive as it went on because they needed to be offended and stuff. What? I don't remember this at all.
And, he would say, you have to eat my flesh. And they'd go, that's gross. He says, all right, you have to drink my blood, too. It was just like...
Okay, that wasn't them being offended by that stuff. That was just, like, is it just a joke he's telling? Because I can't tell. and he should most definitely be clear here.
Just like he said, well, let's up this thing, so the people were, they left and the disciples are left. Jesus turns to them and says, you guys going to leave too? And Peter responded, and he got it so right again. He said, where are we going to go? You have the words of eternal life. Now think about what he just said. I'm going to use my words now. Jesus, we don't understand that sermon any more than the crowd that left.
Okay, so for what I'm picking up here is that the guy started this conversation by saying there are some verses in the Bible that just don't make any sense at all. It's complete garbage, but God has a message that he's trying to communicate. You're just not smart enough or something to understand it. And now he's telling us about that verse for him, which verse he's not smart enough to understand, apparently.
But what we do know is that whenever you talk, we come alive inside. We didn't understand that flesh blood thing. We think you could have done a better job of explaining that, little Old Testament stuff, would have helped us here. But he said, your words bring life to us. We find out why we're alive whenever you talk.
Dude, I feel like this is a terrible sermon. Is it just me?
And that's what happens sometimes. So as I'm reading Revelation, and that particular verse just was highlighted to me, I stopped and I said, God, I want you to teach me what this means. I've got to know what this means.
Okay, so he starts with a verse that's ambiguous and confusing and nonsensical, and he's praying for it to have meaning. So this is what happens. He's going to fabricate meaning now. He's going to come up with some explanation for what it could be, for what it could be trying to communicate, and that may or may not be attached to reality. Matter of fact, it's not attached to reality, what he's about to say, because by and large, the Bible verses mean pretty much nothing. I mean, at face value, many of them have, specific, direct meanings, but there's almost no subtlety behind all of this. Any subtlety you find in the Bible, like deep subtlety, is pretty much read into it by Christian nutcases like this guy, by and large.
Later that day, one of the members of the church just stopped by the office, and he was standing in the doorway. He owned a business, and he was in a hurry to go somewhere, and so he stopped, and he just stands in there, and he tells me the miracle of his healed marriage, and
the miracle of his healed marriage. Okay.
What the Lord has been doing in his life, in his home, in just recent days, and so he's taking me through his story. He's giving me his testimony. And he stands there in the doorway, and I said, man, that's so amazing, Bill. His name is Bill. And he turned to leave, and then he stopped, and he came back, and he said, you have permission to share this with anyone you want. Now, I knew in that moment that was an answer to what I prayed, but I didn't understand it yet. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I knew.
No, it doesn't. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. This guy is a terrible preacher. He is awful in every way. Wow.
I knew this was a divine setup, but it's kind of like Moses with the burning bush. When he turned aside, God spoke. Sometimes the Lord will put moments in your life where you just have to turn aside. If you don't turn aside, you keep on going, you'll never know what was there. But in the pause, in the rest, in the question, in the, what are you saying? What are you doing? So in that moment, I had a little burning bush, and I turned aside, and then he began to teach me. I want to talk to you just briefly about this concept here tonight.
Please, talk to me about this supposed concept. So far, everything this dude has said has been nonsensical garbage. I'm hoping he's going to get to some real substance here, but I doubt it.
First of all, the testimony of Jesus is what?
Your mom.
It's the spirit of prophecy. Thank you.
I was close. Okay, spirit of prophecy, he says. I don't know what that means.
You answered according to the Bible. All right. Now, a testimony is a spoken or written record of anything God has done.
No. A testimony is actually, hang on, let's look the word up, actually. Define testimony. It doesn't necessarily have religious connotations. A formal written or spoken statement, especially one given in a court of law or in the Bible, for example. It could be a number of different contexts, but it's generally a formal written or spoken statement. Here's a second definition. Evidence or proof provided by the existence or appearance of something. His blackened finger was testimony to the fact that he had played in pain. Played in pain. That's weird. Okay. A public recounting of a religious conversion or experience is the third. So that's what testimony is. There's a reason I'm getting specific with this. There's a reason I'm not letting him play with the definition of this word. I listened to a few minutes into this, and I know what he tries to do next. Just keep listening here. Oh, sorry. Shit. Okay, I like sitting here in complete silence too.
He says that testimony is the spirit or anointing of prophecy. What does prophecy do? Prophecy basically either foretells the future or brings a change to the present.
Okay, I'm going to have to think about that one for a second, but I got pulled aside for a second. Somebody in the chat says, "Oh, and you missed the golden, that's what your mom said moment when he said, I had a little burning bush." You're absolutely right. I missed that, man. I hang my head in shame. Okay. Bionic Butter 4356, thank you for the super chat. If Jesus was real, he would absolutely start a podcast. Oh, yeah, certainly, because that's how you disseminate information in today's world, right? He would totally have a podcast nowadays. As a Christian, I wish people would stop taking the Bible so literally. If the 7 days of creation were meant to be literal, the story wouldn't contradict itself. Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. According to, historical record, the account in Genesis was not intended to be literal. It was a specific genre of writing that was not intended to be literal. It was called, oh my God, what's it called? I don't remember the name of the genre now, but there's a specific genre that they wrote in. We have fantasy, sci-fi, comedy, romance. They had a different type. And that type of writing was not intended to be literal. But, facts and evidence and logic and information and history, none of that means anything to extremist nutter butters, like this guy.
Some prophetic words describe something that's going to happen. Other prophetic words actually change the moment that we're in, and there's an instant change because something was said. So if you think about this concept, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, he's basically saying, at least in part, saying that whenever a testimony is spoken, there is a prophetic decree that makes possible an immediate change in the present.
Okay, let me just step back. Think about this again, because what he's doing is being really cryptic and confusing and making absolutely no sense whatsoever. Let's really try to dissect what he's saying here. He's a terrible preacher. He's like Jordan Peterson in a lot of ways, right? Jordan Peterson uses word salad that's completely meaningless, but makes him sound like he knows what he's talking about when he doesn't.
Or anointing of prophecy. What does prophecy do? Prophecy basically either foretells the future or brings a change to the present.
Okay, I don't know what he means by brings a change to the present. No, prophecy is supposed to be foretelling the future. And, of course, they never give us a good reason to think that they have, prophesied accurately. People like this guy, people like Kent Hovind or Kent Christmas or Kenneth Copeland. Why are they all named Ken? This is weird. All of those people pretend that they're capable of prophesying, when in reality, nothing that they say can be taken as prophecy. There's zero evidence for it. Zero. So he says prophecy brings a change in the present. Don't know what he's talking about there. Or foretells the future. All right?
Some prophetic words describe something that's going to happen.
They don't, but they're supposed to.
Other prophetic words actually change the moment that we're in, and there's an instant change because something was said.
Okay, I have never heard that before in my life. I have no clue what he's talking about right now.
So if you think about this concept, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, he's basically saying, at least in part, saying that whenever a testimony is spoken, there is a prophetic decree that makes possible an immediate change in the present.
There's a prophetic decree that immediately changes the present. Okay, I disagree, but all right, I'm listening.
Okay, that's a nice philosophy.
It's a nonsensical philosophy that I've never heard from anybody else. I could have a seminary degree. I understand, these religious ideas so well, like the theology that these people lay down for us. Not that seminary degrees are worth much, in my opinion, but I'm 100% sure that I have the equivalent of it at this point, and I've never heard that before.
Nice theory, so we began to experiment. And it was actually a number of years later, I took it to another level. And so I was in a meeting in Minnesota, and I prayed for this a pastor's wife who had broken her leg or ankle in a snowmobile accident.
Oh, here we go. He's about to get into faith healing, right?
And she had pins and, screws, all this stuff in her ankle. And so I prayed for a while that evening. It was a pretty small crowd, to be honest. It was maybe 50 people, 100 people at the most. It was a wonderful group of believers, but a small crowd. And I spent a good amount of time praying for her at the end of the evening. And she had a little bit relief of pain, but nothing major.
Okay, so he prayed over her leg to make it stop hurting, and it didn't work. All right.
And so she went home that night. Her and her husband went home. They came back the next morning, and we had several days of meetings, morning and night. And she came up to me that morning, and she said, Bill, when I was getting dressed this morning, my husband looked down at my leg and said, hey, that wasn't there before. And she looks down, and she had been missing part of her calf muscle, and it grew back overnight.
Part of her calf muscle was missing. He prayed over her leg, and it grew back overnight. Great. You know what? That's all I need to be a believer. Really, that's it. I need you to pray over somebody and instantly regrow a muscle. Hell, I'll take overnight, not even instant. I'll take overnight, regrow a muscle that was missing overnight. After you pray over it, and you've got a believer in me. In this age of video cameras in everybody's pocket, would you be surprised to find that not one shred of evidence exists for this ever happening, literally ever? Well, look, people are gasping and clapping. Give me a break, man.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So
that would be pretty cool if it was real, if there was literally any proof for it, anything.
I said, well, come here. I said, you need to tell everybody. So,
I got to talk about this for a second. People used to avoid outright claiming to be able to, regrow limbs like this. There's a time where they would limit their ridiculous claims to simple parlor tricks that they could perform in front of everybody, like the leg lengthening trick, or claim that God was giving them information about people in the crowd that were hurting, when in reality, I think this is Peter Popov who did this famously. He was getting fed information from his wife, who had received prayer cards from everybody in the audience the day before or something. He'd walk past somebody. His wife, speaking into an earpiece, would say, "Woman to your left in the green shirt just lost her husband to cancer, and she is, wants you to pray for her, blah, blah, blah." And he would pretend to have divine inspiration. God would speak to him, from on high and tell him all about this woman when it was just the dude's wife telling him all this stuff all along. They would stick to things that could be easily proven through scams, right? And now they seem to have backed themselves into this situation where they don't even feel the need to prove this stuff anymore. They're just going to blatantly, flat out, bald-faced fucking lie to your face about it. Yeah, I can regrow limbs. Absolutely no proof for this whatsoever, but that doesn't matter. You know why? They have learned over the past 50 to 70 years, which is roughly how long televangelists have been, growing, basically. They've learned over those years that they can say literally anything. Anything! And their audience will believe them, no questions asked. Used to be a time when they couldn't get away with claiming to regrow limbs. They are now fully aware that their audience is so gullible, they will believe anything with no questions asked.
We bring her up front, for the morning meeting, we probably had 25 people or so there, and so she shares the testimony. And we're, happy and celebrating, and she goes back to her seat, and as she's going back, a lady on the front row right here comes beelines right towards me, and she says, "If God did that for her, certainly he would do that for me."
Okay, I think that's a Bible quote, isn't it?
Understood something. She understood Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, number one. Number two, he's no respecter of persons. If you get those two things, you realize you're always ready for a divine moment. Because we sometimes disqualify ourselves by wrong thinking. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Say that.
So if you don't, what he's saying, you don't get, your leg regrown by Jesus or something, it's because you didn't love God enough. You didn't believe hard enough. You didn't believe that Jesus was capable of doing this, so he didn't do it for you. This is prosperity gospel in a nutshell. This is the same thing that Kenneth Copeland spreads. The idea that if you just send him a little bit of money, namely actually everything in your bank account, if you just send him everything you've got, he will return it to you tenfold. And if you don't get it back tenfold, it's because you didn't love Jesus enough. It's your fault if you don't get your money back. The height of absurdity and arrogance and just, God, does it get lower than this?
That with me. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And number two is he is no respecter of persons. Say that with me. He is no respecter of persons.
I don't know what that means. No respecter of persons? What?
And so she came up and she told me that. She said, I was in an accident a number of years ago. She said, I am missing part of my calf muscle. I had to relearn how to walk after this horrible, horrible accident that she described to me. So I called to the pastor's wife, associate pastor's wife that was walking back to her seat. I said, hey, come on back up here. We need to pray for her. And so the pastor's wife came and somebody else came. So it was like 3 or 4 people praying. And as they're praying, they watched this muscle form in her leg. It actually grew visibly.
Wow, and in the age of cameras, nobody thought to whip theirs out and start recording. Weird, right? Isn't it weird that, they take pictures of their kids every day and they, do these Snapchat things and they post stuff to their Instagram walls and they put their phone on their dashboard in their car and they talk about Jesus on their way to and from church and post that all over YouTube. But darn it, they just slipped their mind, forgot they had a camera in their pocket for 5 minutes, that they sat there and watched this thing grow, like this muscle regrow in this woman's leg. Just totally forgot that they had such a thing, that they could actually record this.
In front of their eyes. Right at that moment, it was almost like an epidemic of missing calf muscles in Minnesota. It was like everyone in that city was in that meeting of 25 people, and another
Totally.
lady comes up, and then another. There were 4 people. One was kicked by a horse, and it destroyed the muscle. There was actually a growth in its place, a little tumor, and they prayed. They watched that disappear and the muscle form. And then the 4th one, I don't remember what it was, but all 4 of them were healed in this moment. How did it happen? It was initiated by a testimony. After the first breakthrough, the story was given. So the first day that we talked together, Sunday morning, if you were here, I talked to you about how miracles are supposed to shape us how to see. Well, the stories of miracles are actually part of our storehouse, our treasure house. Miracles are, well, here's a verse for you. Psalms, 111. It's in the Bible. It's in the Psalms. I think it's Psalms 119, 111. Maybe that's it. I think that's it. There's not 111 verses in any other chapter, so let's go for that one. And it's a verse that says, his testimony is our inheritance forever.
His testimony is our inheritance forever. Yeah, that sounds like a nonsensical statement in itself. The thing that Jesus said is something that we get to keep with us? What? Okay.
Now think about it. His testimony, what does that mean? Anything he's ever done for anyone belongs to me personally.
Okay, that doesn't sound right, but whatever.
How did they overcome the enemy? By the blood of the Lamb and the what? The word of their testimony. My testimony is not just what I've experienced, it's what I've inherited. You missed that one. How did they overcome the enemy? By the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. In other words, the testimony has to be spoken. It has to be declared. Sometimes you may be driving in your car.
So he's saying if you want to, get your leg regrown or whatever, then you have to, what was it again?
The word of their testimony. In other words, the testimony has to be spoken. It has to be declared.
You have to declare it audibly that you believe that something or other. Okay, I guess.
Sometimes you may be driving in your car and facing doubt and difficult things, and you just speak out loud. Some things just have to be said. You speak out loud. You say, well, I've seen Jesus do this. He's no respecter of persons. So here's this series of calf muscle stories, and I flew from there to Tennessee, and I was with a pastor friend there at his church, and I shared the stories. I was so excited to see finally the application of this concept that he spoke to me so many years ago out of Revelation 19:10. I later discovered and studied that there's a word in the Old Testament for testimony that actually comes from a word that means to do again.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand what he's even saying here.
Are you hearing me?
No, I'm hearing it. It's making no sense at all.
That the nature of the word, Old and New Testament, is when something is spoken, it's revealing God's intent to duplicate the miracle. You want to see a change of an atmosphere in a restaurant? Take 3 or 4 people and do nothing but share testimonies.
Change in an atmosphere in a restaurant. So is he telling his people to go to a restaurant and just start talking about Jesus to literally everybody that you see? That sounds absolutely insufferable. Please don't do that.
And I'm not talking about catching the attention of people. I'm talking about catching the attention of heaven. The angelic realm is fascinated by your view of Jesus. They don't know what you know because you see from a redeemed position.
Okay. So angels don't know what we know because we are living from a redeemed position. This is all complete nonsense, right? Is it just me? This means absolutely nothing.
So I went to Tennessee, and I shared those 4 stories. So excited, what I'd just seen. And we had ministry time, and a medical doctor came up. He had broken his leg a year earlier, and
I bet. Medical doctor broke his leg. Okay.
he had restricted movement. The muscles had atrophied, so they shrunk in size. They weren't fully developed anymore. And he was dealing with pain and all of that. So some of our team prayed for him. And I went over to talk to him afterwards, and he said he was...
Dude, imagine being part of a prayer team. A team that prays. As if you even need a team for that. First of all, it is unequivocally proven that it does nothing for anybody. But aside from that, do you really need a team of people to do that? Can't the same effect be accomplished with just a single person? Why do you have a team of people doing this?
He was completely healed. So that was the report they brought. So I wanted to find out more about him.
All right, let me step back. Listen again.
Prayed for him. And I went over to talk to him afterwards, and he said he was completely healed. So that was the report they brought. So I wanted to find out more about his story. So as I was interviewing him, just talking with him, he told me, he says, I've got all the movement back. He said, all the pain is gone. Everything has been healed. And I was curious about the muscle that was missing. And now it's his entire leg has atrophied. So I asked him, I said, how's the muscle? He said, I can feel my skin growing, stretching. He says,
Totally. I bet. You can feel your skin growing and stretching after you prayed for him, right?
I can feel my skin stretching. So we got through with those 2 cities, and I flew home, and I wanted to tell our family, because I like to bring in the spoil, because they help to strengthen and pray for us and stuff as we go out. And so I came home and I told them the stories of those 5 people. And it was later, I believe it was later that week, or possibly a week and a half later, I was in a prophetic gathering of about 15 or 20 people. And we were going to be ministering prophetically to this team of people that were becoming a part of Bethel.
Becoming a part of Bethel. That's interesting. So Bethel has special meaning to Jehovah's Witnesses, but there's also a place called Bethel School of the Supernatural, I think, or something like that. And it's this hardcore evangelical nutcase school. It's effectively a cult. It's real shit, man. Not good. And I believe that Kat Kerr helps write the curriculum for them and stuff. So anyway, it's not easy to escape once you end up there. Is that what he's talking about? I can only assume that's what he's referring to. I'm not super sure.
And so we started praying for this lady, and she said, do you remember, in fact, it was 2 weeks. She said, you remember 2 weeks ago when you testified about the man with a broken leg? I said, yeah. She said, well, I had the same thing. I had the same thing. I broke my leg. The muscles had atrophied. I had limited movement, pain, all of that. And she said, while you were talking, my leg turned hot, and the skin began to stretch as muscles were forming in that leg, and there was that creative miracle.
This dude has some weird obsession with muscles regrowing.
And the Lord completely healed and restored her. Listen to me. While I was talking.
So is instantaneous. Hey, fantastic. Then you can prove it, right? He said he has 5 examples. Record the next one. Record the next one and show it to me. And I'm a believer. Just like that. Boom.
Some things just need to be said. Oftentimes there is a restriction of what is released over the people of God. Heaven waiting, in a sense, for something to be spoken. I was in a meeting. I'm giving you mostly just testimonies and stories tonight for a reason. I promise you, we'll open the Bible before I'm done.
Probably should have led with that. This is a Christian sermon he's giving, right? Isn't that what this is supposed to be based on, is the Bible? He's just making up nonsense right now. You know, a lot of this stuff actually came from something here. Let me just pull it up. 1 second here. Yeah, here we go. So a lot of this, the basis for a lot of this faith healing stuff came from Mark chapter 16. Okay, now if you pull up Mark 16 and just kind of take a gander around here, you will notice on the bottom, verses 9 to 19, there's a section here that says, the earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have verses 9 to 20. Now, we didn't know for a long time, but these verses 9 to 20, are fake. They are fake verses. They were added hundreds of years later by monks. They don't belong in the Bible. And as a result, a lot of these verses, or a lot of Bibles, removed these verses entirely, took them out, got rid of them, because they're fake. And everybody knows that they're fake. But here's where it gets interesting. These verses are actually the basis for faith healing. At least in part. These verses are partially the backing verses that describe faith healing. Just listen to what it says here. This is after Jesus died and was resurrected, okay? Mark was the first gospel to have been written, and then I believe Luke and Matthew used Mark as a source to like rewrite it and kind of reform it into what they wanted it to be. And then John was written hundreds of years after that. John doesn't even belong in the Bible, arguably. Of course, it used Mark and Matthew and Luke as a source. And there are stories in John that were added that did not belong there at all. Like the story about he who is without sin cast the first stone. That never happened. That story was fake in the book of John. But anyways, Mark was written first, right? And it was kind of a lackluster ending. It was anticlimactic. Like, just read how it ends. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early in the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? So they're on their way to see Jesus, right? To see Jesus' dead body. He wasn't supposed to have died, by the way. If he were the Messiah, he wouldn't have died. That's why he has to come back a second time, because there's still stuff that he didn't accomplish that he can't be the Messiah unless he accomplishes. So they had to come up with this explanation for, why he died and why he's still the Messiah. So they said, oh, he's coming back. They thought he'd be back in their lifetime, but that's a story for another day. So anyways, Jesus died. They're on their way to anoint his body with spices, and it says, but when they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. The end. That's how the book of Mark ended. Just like that. They told nothing to anybody because they were afraid. And that was the end of the story. Now, there were some monks back in the day, hundreds of years, centuries after this book was written, that were like, you know what, I don't like how that ended. That kind of sucked. That was like an anticlimactic ending. Like, they didn't say anything to anybody. Really, there's nothing more to the story. You know what, let's just make something up. Let's make this interesting, baby. So they added to the end of Mark. And here are the verses that they added. The ones that don't belong. When Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. And he told those who'd been with him and who were mourning and weeping. When they heard that Jesus was alive and that she had seen him, they did not believe it. Afterward, Jesus appeared in a different form to 2 of them while they were walking in the country. So these monks that were like adding to the story were trying to add credibility to the idea that Jesus really was, the Messiah and really did come back and all that stuff. Like, the story ended with them never having seen Jesus, never actually seeing his body, but they wanted to add credibility, so they claimed that people had seen Jesus. They claimed that he had appeared to them after death. That was their addition to this. And here's the important part. Here's how it routes back to, what's his name? Bill Johnson. After he appeared to them, he said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned." This is the basis for being, born again. This is at least part, people went through the Bible and sifted through it and found various different verses to back up each of these things after, formulating these ideas from these verses. But these are the things that really started the Pentecostal revolution, or not just the Pentecostal one, but the Protestant revolution. So you should be born again. If you're not, you will die. These signs will accompany those who believe. In my name, they'll drive out demons. This is deliverance ministry. Greg Locke believes in this. They will speak in new tongues, speaking in tongues. You see televangelists do this all the time. They will pick up snakes with their hands, snake handling, and they will drink deadly poison, drinking poison. Pentecostals do this stuff all the time. It will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people and they will get well. Faith healing. This is all fake. These verses are fake. All of this stuff that these televangelists do, all the stuff they preach about, the basis for their belief is built on sand. It's all a lie. It was all made up hundreds of years later. It just honestly blows my mind that they actually buy this stuff, that he actually believes these fake verses. Does he, though, is my question. Does he believe these fake verses? Seems like it, but, he's also very obviously willing to lie to us about absolutely anything, so I guess it's anyone's guess. Anyway, let's keep listening here. The point is, his whole belief system is fake, built on lies. Fake garbage added hundreds of years later.
Even though I've already quoted it.
Okay, let's step back a little bit. The whole point of writing your own testament is that you think the previous testaments are aren't sufficient. Just ask Joseph Smith, right? The New Testament, Joseph Smith's testament. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Testimonies and stories tonight for a reason. I promise you, we'll open the Bible before I'm done. Even though I've already quoted it.
So, yeah, the Bible verses that he's been quoting, did he even quote any? The whole belief system that he's espousing right now is built on fake verses. That's the point.
I was in this meeting, and this gal came to me. In fact, I mentioned it sometime this month. I think I've been here a month now. A good month, but a month, yeah. The Lord's healing somebody even right now on the inside of your knee. There's a muscle strain right here. It's not a joint issue. It's actually in the muscle strain on the inside of the knee. And if I were you, I'd just start moving it around and see what's happening.
Dude, is he talking to the crowd about, their muscle hurting or whatever? This is another interesting trick. This is a variation of cold reading that I see from televangelists a lot. They will target some very specific thing. Somebody is in the audience who was born in the month of May, 1987, and they are having trouble with their leg right now. Their leg hurts terribly, and they just got bad news from the doctor. But God wants me to tell you personally that it's going to be okay. He's watching over you. Now, if that applies to you, you feel called out. You feel seen. You feel like God just sent a message to you personally, and guess what? You are a believer until the day you die. From that point forward, you will believe absolutely anything this guy has to say because he just called you out personally. A cold reading trick that psychics have been using for generations. Hank Kunneman does the same exact thing. It's just dirty, man.
So, I was in this, when the meeting was over, this gal came up to me, and her first words, she walks up to me, she goes, "The voice has stopped." I went, "Okay, what do you mean? Explain to me what's going on." She said, "I've had bipolar for, I don't forget how many years." And her issue was there was constantly voices, and it was obviously a tormenting thing for her.
Bipolar disorder, and they hear voices. Okay, interesting. Let me tell you a little something about my life, my personal experience. Just about everybody I have ever been close to in my life, almost, has had bipolar disorder. The mother of my kid, my mom, my brother, my dad, my best friend when I was younger, all of them had bipolar disorder. I've been surrounded with this condition since day one, basically. And I have never in my life heard somebody say that they heard voices. Now, that being said, bipolar disorder is actually on the schizophrenia spectrum. They're on the same spectrum, right? I could see it as plausible, I suppose, that maybe bipolar disorder could cause hallucinations. With severe bipolar disorder, you may have hallucinations where you see or hear things that aren't there. You may also have delusions where you firmly believe in something that isn't true. Yeah, the delusion thing, that's super common. Usually delusions of grandiosity where you believe that you're the biggest and the best and the smartest and the strongest and blah, blah, blah. That's why Kanye West is, the way that he is, because he has bipolar disorder. And he's absolutely convinced that he's the best there ever was as a result. But hallucinations, I have never heard of that. I mean, apparently it happens. It's just, it seems to me that that's exceedingly rare. And I believe that the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that helps us diagnose mental conditions in the first place, says that if you're having 3 or more hallucinations per month, auditory or visual, then you probably have schizophrenia, not bipolar disorder. I'm just trying to break this down logically because I don't think this guy knows what he's talking about, like, at all. But okay, let's keep listening here.
She said, "The voice has stopped. What do I do?" And so the father then walked up moments later, and he's a retired surgeon, and he said, "What do I do? What do we do now that this has happened?" And so I talked them through the situation, asked them questions and give them some advice and that sort of thing. And
dude shouldn't be giving advice to anybody.
And so they left, and it was like 2 weeks later, the father actually came. It's about a maybe 4.5 hour trip from where we were for that meeting up to Redding, where I live in Northern California. And he was there on a Sunday morning. When the meeting was over, I'd like to go to the back and shake hands and talk to people. And I was back there, and he just walks up. I didn't recognize him, but he just walks up to me and he says, "I have my daughter back." And the Lord had healed her of bipolar during worship.
Okay, that's honestly disgusting that he would say such a thing. I feel like I don't need to say this, but I'm going to anyways. This guy is incapable of healing anybody of anything. And if you have bipolar disorder, you should take your medicine. There is no excuse for not taking it. The excuse certainly isn't, he healed you or whatever. He healed you of this. The fact that he's saying that he's capable of healing people at all is giving people the impression that they're, if they just go to his church or they pray hard enough, they love God enough, they don't have to take their medicine. This is absolutely grotesque, what he's saying here. It's just wrong. It's all fun and games when he claims to heal amputees because he can't. There isn't an amputee that is going to go there and actually get healed or something. Like, they're going to find out quickly that they're not going to get healed. But messing with people, taking advantage of people, that have mental conditions and using that mental condition against them to pry money out of their pockets. If this wasn't a religion, this would be illegal. Really. That's why I have such a huge problem with some of the things that cults do. Some of the shit that cults do would be illegal in any other context. Taking advantage of people, telling them if you donate, your money, I will heal you. That is illegal in any other context because you're flat out blatantly lying to these people. You're not going to heal them. But if it's a religious belief, it's protected. Just disgusting stuff, man. Quick reminder, don't forget to check out my website, owenmorgan.com. I would appreciate that very much. Just go to my website. When you go there, a little pop-up appears, says, subscribe to my email list right here. Just give me your name. It's optional. And give me your email address. And you will get access to early, complete, some ad-free videos every single week. You can also check out the website itself for some of this stuff. Like if you want access to ad-free videos or whatever. And it's, it's an aggregator. So you can look at all videos released the week of February 26th. Just click that in the sidebar there. You can look at all of my main channel's videos. March 5th, the week of March 5th, it lists every video released for that week that's up here so far. So go to my website, sign up for my newsletter, and access early stuff that's ad-free. Pretty useful.